The Christmas you celebrate today, the Christmas tree glowing in your living room, the cards you send to family, the gifts under the tree, even the idea that Christmas is about family and charity, did not begin in America. In the 1800s, across the Atlantic Ocean, inside a British palace, one woman and her family were quietly creating the Christmas the world would come to know. Her name was Queen Victoria. Through love, tradition, and royal influence, her Christmas celebrations didn't just stay in England. They crossed oceans, shaped culture, and helped define the modern American Christmas. This is the untold story of how a British queen changed Christmas forever. How Queen Victoria celebrated Christmas. The way Queen Victoria, reign 1830–1901, and her family celebrated their Christmases became familiar to the public over the years, thanks to the intense media coverage of the royal family, particularly the regular features in popular illustrated magazines. Victoria's German husband, Prince Albert, 1819–1861, made Christmas trees popular in Britain, and her children helped the idea of sending Christmas cards take off. Victoria and Albert loved to give gifts to each other, usually ones that reminded of what they had done together that particular year, or included portraits of their children. The royal family also helped promote the idea of charitable deeds, as the old year was replaced by the new, distributing Christmas trees, presents, food, and useful goods like blankets and coal to the poor. The joy of Christmas. Queen Victoria was certainly a fan of the Christmas season, once saying, "This happy, most blessed festival again returns, and with it so many joyful feelings, cooling 6." The Queen wrote the following diary entry on Christmas Eve 1843. "This happy day has again returned, and it seems but yesterday we had last celebrated it. Time flies too fast. I feel certain that our Heavenly Father, through His blessed Son, whose birth we at this time so joyfully and gratefully commemorate, will grant that we may celebrate many more happy Christmas Eves together, and with our children." Just what the Queen, her consort, and their 9 children got up to at Christmas was of great interest to the public, and many a trend became an enduring national tradition thanks to its endorsement by the royal family. All of Victoria's Christmases with Albert were spent at Windsor Castle, but following his death in 1861, other favorite residences for the end-of-year celebrations included Osborne House on the Isle of Wight in Brighton by the Sea. Victoria, even after Albert's passing, continued many of the long-established family traditions, such as decorating Christmas trees for each of her children. But the golden era of Victoria's Christmases was from 1840 to 1860. Royal Christmas cards. The first Christmas cards came about in 1843, thanks to Sir Henry Cole, who had illustrated pre-printed cards made, which he could send to all of his friends and family rather than write individual letters. The image on the cards showed the Cole family raising a toast surrounded by illustrated acts of charity. The greeting was the now familiar, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you." Cole had 1,000 of the cards printed, and some were put on sale, but the idea did not take off. What was needed was a royal endorsement. This came not from the Queen but her children, who sent each other, and their parents' handmade greeting cards both at Christmas and New Year. Victoria then adopted the idea and became the first celebrity card sender. Victoria's cards, as with today's royalty, usually showed a picture of herself and her family. From 1844, printed cards, now with more jolly Christmas imagery, were sold with great success. Printers knew they were onto a good thing, and they became more and more ambitious with the designs of their cards, which were available to buy everywhere from tobacconists to drapers' shops. With the new halfpenny post for postcards, people of all classes could send Christmas cards to their loved ones. Victorian Christmas cards soon became hugely popular as the designs and materials used became ever more ambitious, and the cards began to include printed poems and longer greeting messages. Albert's Christmas trees. The first British royal to have a Christmas tree was Victoria's grandmother, Queen Charlotte, 1744-1818, wife of King George III of Great Britain, reigned 1761-820. Although this tree was not a fir but a yew tree, it is Prince Albert, keen to recapture the glittering memories of his own childhood Christmases in Coburg, who is credited with popularizing the Germanic tradition amongst the British public. A handsome fir tree was selected for the role of becoming the family's Christmas centerpiece. Each year, from the early 1840s, Albert had a number of German springelbaum trees cut down in Coburg and transported to Britain. Albert's trees were set upon tables and decorated with candles, gift-wrapped small toys, sweets, charms, and candied fruit. Each family member had their own tree, as well as the Queen's mother, the Duchess of Kent. Albert's idea was a hit with his 2 children. The other 7 were yet to come, the prince consort nodding they were full of happy wonder at the German Christmas tree and its radiant candles. Cooling, 21. Each table was laden with gifts of all kinds. In addition, there were often several other Christmas trees set up in the same residence, and there was one for the senior household staff. For Christmas in 1860, Albert had some of Windsor Castle's chandeliers taken down, and Christmas trees were hung upside down in their place. The idea of a decorated tree was spread by popular color-illustrated magazines, starting in 1848 with an edition of the Illustrated London News, which revealed the private festivities of the royal family and their marvelous-looking Christmas trees. That edition of the magazine included a colored engraving of one of Albert's trees at Windsor and gave the following description. The tree employed for this festive purpose is a young fir, about 8 feet high 4 m, and has 6 tiers of branches. On each tier or branch are arranged a dozen wax tapers. Pendant from the branches are elegant trays, baskets, bonbonnières, and other receptacles for sweetmeats, of the most varied and expensive kind, and all forms of colors and degrees of beauty. Fancy cakes, gilt gingerbread, and eggs filled with sweetmeats are also suspended by variously colored ribbons from the branches. On the summit of the tree stands a small figure of an angel with outstretched wings, holding in each hand a wreath. These trees are objects of much interest to all visitors to the castle from Christmas Eve, when they are first set up, until Twelfth Night, when they are finally removed. The royal couple was also more directly responsible for spreading the new fashion, since each year they gave free Christmas trees to various institutions such as schools and army barracks. Soon enough, other public places began to set up a Christmas tree, notably London's Crystal Palace from 1854. The public could buy a tree for their own home at such places as Covent Garden Market. In this way, Christmas trees gradually replaced the traditional rings of mistletoe, which had been popular in many a medieval Christmas household. Christmas Eve and presents. The gifts hung from the tree were opened by the royal family on Christmas Eve, in keeping with the German tradition. Although there could be so many, it needed a little time to appreciate them all. Victoria wrote in her diary on Christmas Day 1859, "Immediately after breakfast, when I have a look at our present tables and admire them in detail, Royal Trust Collection." Presents could range from finely bound books from family members, to exquisite jewelry from fellow European royals, to portraits given by famous theater actors of the day. A diary entry for Christmas Eve 1845 records some of the gifts Victoria received. At 6, Albert took me into the blue closet, where as usual my frosted tree stood, and my presents were all arranged on a table. Amongst them was a most beautifully executed inkstand, with a stag in frosted silver standing on Scotch stones, and a beautiful little onyx cup set in enamel and precious stones. Dearest Albert had so wonderfully thought out all his gifts. Victoria was just as thoughtful for Albert. The young queen gave her husband a beautiful Malacca walking stick for their first Christmas as a married couple in 1840. The top handle of the cane was made of enamel and set with semi-precious stones. Victoria records in her diary that Albert was delighted with it. The gifts the queen and consort exchanged very often reminded of the travels they had made together, such as for Christmas 1845, when Albert gave Victoria the ornate gold inkstand mentioned above. This gift was a reminder of the couple's sojourn at Blair Castle in the Scottish Highlands that year. As so often with Albert's gifts, he designed it himself and had ordinary stones incorporated into it, which he had collected on the trip. Another such souvenir of travels together was a Celtic silver brooch studded with garnets, which Albert had secretly bought during the couple's visit to Ireland, and which he presented on Christmas Eve 1849. Another popular gift was an item that incorporated portraits of family members, both of each other and their children, and sometimes even the royal dogs. Victoria once gave Albert a portrait of his favorite greyhound Eos. Perhaps the most impressive such gift, one that took many years to complete, was a gold and pearl bracelet which Albert presented to Victoria with enamel portraits of all 9 of their children. Each Christmas, Albert gave Victoria a new link for the bracelet when another child had reached 4 years old. To make the gift even more personal, each portrait panel of the bracelet contained a lock of hair of the child shown on the front. The Queen was keen to capture precious Christmas moments for posterity, and she often engaged a photographer such as Dr. Becker, Albert's librarian, or even a painter for that express purpose. In 1850, for example, James Roberts was asked to create a watercolor capturing the main Christmas tree at Windsor Castle. Many of these photos and pictures, as well as pictures drawn and given by their children as Christmas gifts, were organized by Victoria and Albert into chronological albums, which captured their family life together. Church services. Ever since William the Conqueror reigned 1066–1087, British monarchs had attended church services on Christmas Day. William had even chosen 25 December for his coronation day. Victoria and her family attended the Christmas service each morning of Christmas Day. She also made sure her children understood why, nodding in her diary, talked to Vicky and Bertie together of this day, the meaning of the great festival, and read to them part of the account of the birth of our Savior. Cooling. 10. Victoria continued the tradition right through her life. Even when she reached her 80s and was too ill to go out, a service was arranged for her at home. The Christmas feast. Christmas through the ages has involved feasts of fine foods, and Victoria was no different from her predecessors in putting on a lavish spread to honor the season. The dining room, typically the private dining room at Windsor, was decorated with several Christmas trees, garlands of winter foliage, and the whole scene brilliantly lit by an army of silver candelabras. Victoria adopted the custom of her predecessors and had a boar's head on the Christmas Day menu, a complex speciality which was pickled, stuffed, braised, and roasted. The dish was one of Albert's favorites. In later years, Victoria's table centerpiece was usually supplied by her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II. In fact, having relatives all over Europe was a distinct advantage in amassing a spectacular array of dishes for Christmas. The Russian Tsar sent Victoria sturgeon. The Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Schwerin gave pâté de foie gras, and the Emperor of Austria-Hungary offered a case of Takagi Tokay, a renowned sweet white wine. Other dishes on offer at the royal Christmas dinner included a massive baron of beef, 2 sirloins with the backbone, which usually came from a prize-winning animal in the royal farms. Such a huge chunk of meat, which weighed in at well over 400 pounds, 180 kg, took a long time to cook well, usually 15 hours over an open fire. Another speciality was a woodcock pie, which contained the meat from 100 birds. There was roast swan, curried hare, turtle soup, and carp. Then there were the more usual meat offerings like game pie and roast pheasant, grouse, and turkey. Then only a cameo player in this all-star culinary cast. Victoria noted in her diary that it was expected she at least try a bit from every dish available, and there were usually around 35. Fortunately, some dishes, like the boar's head and baron of beef, remained on the Christmas sideboard for many days. Dessert was as impressive in variety as the main courses. The royal chef might make a model of Windsor Castle in sugar. There were cakes, mince pies, then still a mix of fruit and beef, sweets, pastries, fruit jellies, plum pudding, dried fruit, candied fruit, nuts, and small sugared toys for the children. An equally extravagant meal was enjoyed on New Year's Day. A third grand meal took place on Twelfth Night, 5 January. This feast included a 12th cake, which by the 19th century was a large, rich fruit cake covered in almond paste and sugar icing. The cake, the forerunner of today's Christmas cake, contained a silver trinket in homage to the bean once put there in medieval times. The lucky finder of this bean or trinket received a crown. In the 20th century, the silver trinket was replaced by a silver coin and hidden instead inside the Christmas pudding. Victoria's 12th cake was, naturally, bigger than most and usually measured around 30 inches, 76 cm across, its top decorated with miniature Christmas trees and figures. Royal games. Christmas has always been a holiday when games of all kinds have been played at parties and dinners, and the Victorian royal household was no different from any other happy home. Victoria recorded in her diary in 1841, "We played and sang, and we had some dancing afterwards. Such a happy ending to the old year. Cooling, 82. There were musical performances, often of pieces Albert had composed or those sent as gifts by such illustrious friends as Felix Mendelssohn. There were traditional games like blind man's bluff, charades, and snapdragon, picking out raisins from a bowl of flaming brandy. Victoria and her family usually attended a play or pantomime during the Christmas week, but famous actors of the day also came to perform at the royal residence. Victoria's children frequently put on a performance known as tableaux vivants, where scenes from real life or famous historical events were recreated with costumes, scenery, and props, but where none of the actors were allowed to move. Finally, the holiday season was an opportunity for winter sports. Albert loved ice skating and ice hockey, while Victoria preferred sleigh rides. New Year gift giving. British monarchs have been giving gifts on New Year's Day since the Middle Ages. On 1 January, Victoria typically distributed gifts to the poor and needy. These presents were usually such practical items as bread, meat, blankets, and sacks of coal, although there could be more festive items too, like plum pudding. These acts of generosity were held, for example, at the large hall in Windsor Castle's riding school, and they benefited around 1,000 people each year. On 6 January, Feast of the Epiphany, the giving of 3 gifts given to baby Jesus by the Magi in the story of the Nativity was repeated with the Queen distributing frankincense, myrrh, and 25 newly minted gold sovereigns. It was Albert who had decided to replace the traditional sheets of gold leaf with more practical coins. This event, still today, marks the traditional end of a royal Christmas.